Hi everyone, Scott here from NAMC, or the North American MIG Consortium. I just wanted to share with you a technique that I've been using, or I used on a previous build that really worked out for me to help shape the nose. For those of us that build score and fold park jets, I know that shaping the nose can be one of those things that can be a real pain and cause of stress. And I'm not saying that this is by far the holy grail of shaping noses, but I used it. This is actually the nose section of a Mig FA, which is kind of a concept stealth plane that Stefan, my partner, one of my partners in NAMC, has been working on for a couple months. So I've been doing some flying and testing with it with a previous prototype, and we're hoping that this is our final prototype. So I wanted to do hopefully do kind of a how-to video on how I've been able to shape the nose. Now this will not necessarily work on all park jets. The thing with this and our NAMC Mig-35, but also I think a couple of the RC Powers version 4 planes, is that the nose and fuselage are basically like a box. So you build your three sides first, and then the last piece you'll have, this top piece that's going to go on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over right from this stage. Obviously I've already put in the nose former in the front part here. I already have put my tape on the inside of the score lines, and I've also put my Velcro in here already for my battery, since that's a lot easier to do, I find, when the piece is laying flat. Now I used to use this fiberglass mesh drywall tape. Of course, when the pressure's on, I can never find the end, but you know what I mean. It's like a mesh tape that has some adhesive on one side, so you can just stick it on. And then I used to use either foam cure, which is a great product that we at NAMC have been using for quite a while, that you can get from Hobby King and several places around the world, or foam tack, which I still have a little bit of. Putting that on and then smearing some of that on. Well, that chewed up a lot of glue, used up a lot of glue, and with this method I don't really need that extra reinforcement. So it's going to be a step-by-step process, because obviously you don't going to want to sit here and watch the glue dry. So I'll go sort of step by step. So let me just go over I've already talked about this is the tape now that I use on the inside of my score lines. Again, under pressure I can't find the end. So this is like a fiberglass strapping tape. I think this is like 5/8 inch wide, 3/4 inch wide. Hopefully you can see on the camera there, it's got like fiberglass strands that run down the length of it. So I just cut some pieces of that and put that on the inside of the score lines. So I'm also, the main thing I'm going to be using to shape this part of the nose, these, I'll call them fingers for lack of a better term, is hot glue. So I've got my hot glue gun here. I've already got it plugged in and heating up. There used to be a little piece that came down here, sort of like a stand, so you could set it on the table. I've cut that off, just whacked that off with a hacksaw. It just finds, because I'm going to be fitting it into some fairly tight spots, so it's a little easier to do that without this thing in the way. So anyway, so that's getting good and hot. The other thing I want to have handy are, I always, when I cut out a plane, I always cut up lots of these little bits of scrap foam for spreading glue around. So we'll have those just handy. And then I'm going to show you the sort of the hot glue stage early on, and then once I get this formed, what I like to do is I put in these notches here on the other side of the score line, is we're going to put foam cure in those, and then smear that down with a toothpick to drive that in there. So we're just going to use just the amount of glue that we need, but it's going to be very, very strong, as I mentioned. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I like to finish my noses to get them nice and smooth and sleek. You know, if your nose on your plane is smooth and sleek, then it prevents, you know, if you have a nose that's you know, kind of rough and lots of imperfections on it, it's going to cause a lot of dirty air, which is then going to flow over the rest of your plane. So after before the final stages, I like to use, this is a very super lightweight spackle or filler. This is made by a company called DAP. It's called Fast and Final, and it's super light, and it's kind of like the consistency almost of like you know, like a chocolate mousse or something. It's really, really light. So, and I'm going to use a very little amount of that and then sand it down, and that just makes the nose look beautifully smooth. So those are the products that we use. These are the toothpicks that I like to use. I buy these like a gajillion at a time for like $1 from the dollar store, and because they have their, you know, they're round and then have that nice tapered edge, when I push the foam cure down into the groove there, it just seems to work really well. Okay, so essentially what I like to do is, you can see here I've got basically 5 fingers. So what I like to do is form the 2 side pieces here first, okay, and then make them, and then so then I reduce it down to 3, and then eventually I'm going to join all of those together. So when you bend this together, obviously it curves a little bit. So on the inside, I'll use this propeller for lack of anything else. On the inside here, I like to try and make sure that these very inside edges on the fingers where they come together are what I'm pushing together. Like, I don't want the nose to be like this or like this. I want it to be, you know, those 2 sides line up as closely as possible. So what we're going to do first, and I always want to keep, I like to try and keep the hot glue as much on the inside of the plane, because later on when I want to shave it and sand it down, I don't want big globs of hot glue on the outside of the seam, because hot glue doesn't, it's hard to cut hot glue and sand it afterwards. So what we're going to do here essentially is, I'm going to run, just before I start doing it, I'm going to run a little small bead of hot glue just on the inside here for about the very last ½ inch. And Stefan, my partner in NAMC, sort of taught me this. It's, you know, it's what you would call, I guess, spot welding with hot glue. So what I essentially want to do is just be able to hold these 2 pieces together with a little spot weld of hot glue, and then after that I'm going to run some hot glue on the inside of the seam. So I just want to explain that to you before I actually do it. Okay, so hot glue gun is heated up. I apologize right now for the angle. If you're not going to be able to see, I'm left-handed, so so here we go. So I'm basically just a very, very small bead of hot glue there on the inside, and then just press that together, and then just hold it. And there's a little excess there, so as it cools off, I just wipe that off with my finger. Just hold on to that for a minute or so. I like to do one side at a time. I don't like to rush through it too much. Basically what this process has allowed me to do is I really haven't had to mess around with using any pins, so that's worked out really well. So let's see here, we'll take a gamble. There we go. So you can see now that spot weld of hot glue is holding that tip together. Okay, which is now, I know this is going to be hard for you to see, but now I've got this seam here on the inside. So the 2 pieces are held together, and I've got this seam here on the inside. So what I'm going to essentially be doing is I'm going to take my hot glue gun, I'm going to lay a very thin layer, a very thin bead of glue on this inside seam here, and then I'm going to take right away before it dries. And I should mention, I'm just using, this is actually a low temperature glue gun. I find I like to use these because the glue will dry quick, so you can't be, you know, fooling around with it. But I've played around with the high temp, and the high temp actually tends to melt the foam on me. Or maybe I'm just clumsy with my touch with the glue gun, I'm not sure. But anyway, I got this I think at Walmart, and just use these little mini glue sticks. Okay, so again, it's going to be tough for you to see because of the angle. So I'm just going to run. Hold this the right way here. Okay. So just a thin little bead right down the inside of that seam, and then while the glue is still soft, I hold it like this, and I just run that scrap piece of foam a couple of times just on the inside of that. So you might not be able to see that, but you know, you can see the excess. There's excess glue now on this piece of foam. So what I've done now is I've scraped it, you know, just like if you were putting caulking or something around your bathtub, is essentially what I've done. So now I've got a nice seam of hot glue spread across that seam on the inside, and I don't have any hot glue now on the outside on this seam. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause right now. I'm going to do the other side, and then I'll come back and show you how I put the three of them together. So be right back. Okay, folks, back with you again. So now I've done the other side. It literally takes like you know, a minute, 2 minutes. So now I've got my two pieces formed. What I would say is, you know, just make sure that before you go on to this next step, that when you put the glue on the inside of these two side pieces, just make sure that that's really well set up, so that when you start to bend it, you don't pull away the glue joint that you've already put on there. So what I always like to do is, you know, just kind of form it a couple of times. Just, you know, gently bend. The two side pieces essentially, you know, are just going to kind of come in and meet in the middle, and the bottom piece is just going to curve up and meet them, you know. So you sort of have to figure out how you want your nose to be shaped. Now the one thing is to remember, at least with my method, is obviously I want it to look as good as I possibly can right from the outset, but I'm going to be shaving this thing down later on using a knife like this with a brand new sharp blade. I'm going to be shaving all of these grooves here, so you can shave a little bit off with your knife, and then the final stage after I put all the spackle and everything else on, is it's going to get a good sanding job. So you can make up for any little imperfections with some sandpaper, or with a knife and some sandpaper later on. Okay, so what I like to do on this stage now is I've got this inside piece, this middle piece that's going to go up sort of in between these two pieces. So what I like to do is, again, using that sort of spot welding technique, is put just a very small bead sort of in the last ½ an inch, as close on the inside as possible. There we go, just the smallest amount, and then before it starts to dry, just hold that up. And then just you know, give it a good minute, because now you're curving sort of three pieces together, so the tension against the glue is a little bit stronger than it was when I did the two side pieces. So you want to give it you know, sort of an extra minute of holding it to let that glue set and hold all those pieces together. Okay, so there we go. So far so good. So you saw how long that took. So now essentially my nose is shaped. So now what I'm going to do is, on these seams here again on the inside, is again I'm going to run just a very small bead of hot glue on the inside. So I'm going to do those one at a time, and again, got my couple pieces of scrap foam here. And this is the part here where it gets a little tricky, you know, if you've still got this little stand thing on the end of your hot glue gun. So what you might end up having to do is lay, you know, kind of a bit of a glob. I wish I could hold this a better way so you could see it, but lay sort of a bit of a glob and then smooth it with your foam. But anyway, I'm just going to try and do this best as I can so you can see it. So quick bead down the inside, piece of scrap foam again. Smoothing that out on the inside. There, so you can see, hopefully you can see there, I did get a little slap happy with the glue, but I wiped quite a bit off. Now I learned this from watching flighttest.com, is that when you spread, when the hot glue is still warm and you spread it, it sort of creates more surface tension and actually a better bond across a seam like that. So it does two things when you spread that foam. It makes a better bond, and then it also gets rid of any excess. You know, each one of these little sticks, mini sticks that I use, weighs 4 grams, so the less I can use, the better. But you know, this to me, I would say maximum I'm adding maybe 1 gram to my plane. But you know, I haven't had to use any pins. So I'm just going to repeat the process on this other side. There we go. Again, smearing off the excess. And you know what I do is sometimes if I get a big glob, is, you know, use a clean corner of your scrap foam so that you're not smearing that same glob that you just took off of there. So there we go. That's as quick and as easy as that was. So again, basically all we're doing is we're just using kind of like a spot weld method with hot glue, just to hold the tips together, to get the nose into the shape that you want it, and then putting the hot glue down on the inside of the seam to hold that together. And then I don't have any hot glue right now showing on the outside. So now basically my nose is, this part of my nose, which is probably the most difficult part, is basically done. And you know, other than the first little pause I did and the yapping I did about the materials at the start, that's about as quick as it is. All right, so we're gonna get rid of this glue gun so I don't burn myself. Okay, so this is the top piece. Now I'm using, I should have said at the front if I didn't. I'm using, this is called Fly Value XPS from RC Foam in the United States. In talking with my partner Stefan again, it's probably about similar to maybe B grade model plane foam. So it's softer and more pliable. It's a bit softer and more pliable than Depron, but this will work. The same method will work if you build entirely with Depron. This stuff just seems to shape a little bit easier, and it sands nicer than Depron. So I still use Depron for the wings and these 3 pieces here, these 2 bulkheads and this centerpiece. These are made out of Depron just because I like to have that extra strength where I want it. But this is very, very inexpensive. Now the thing with foam is, you know, it's similar to plywood. You've got, it might be hard to see, this is what we would call, I guess, the bad side. It's quite rough and lots of little grooves on it. This side is, you know, it doesn't look perfect, but it's much smoother. So this, as you can see on the side here, has got a pretty good curve to it. So the one thing about foam, you can see I've already been playing around with it, is if you do this, you want to have the bad side or the rough side facing you. And what you can do is you can just kind of gently do this with your hands. So you can see I did one run there. You can see how nice of a curve that has in it. The other thing you can do is this I've got sort of a round edge on the table, and you can just run this. I just like to do this because I think I have a little bit more control. So I don't think I need much more curve than that. So let's just dry fit this. Okay, so I might have a little bit too much curve in the back, but anyway, we're gonna tape that down. Okay, so this part of the build, this part of the nose, I like to use foam cure. So what I do is I'm not going to use, unless I really need to, I'm not going to use any pins. I'm just going to use some tape. So I'm just going to get my foam cure going here, and I'm just going to show you how I do this. Now I've left my hot glue gun plugged in, just in the absolute situation where I might need to spot weld this nose, but I don't think I'm going to. I think I've got the nice curve there, and because this foam is fairly pliable. So let me just talk to you a bit more about foam cure. Foam cure, this is about $5 a bottle for a 4-ounce bottle. Now it stays fairly flexible. It says flexible on the container here, and they'll even tell you on their website that it's not good for it doesn't, once it's cured, it's not good for making hinges. And I agree with that if you just use the straight glue. But for example, this is my these are my elevons. Now eventually this will be these will be cut in the middle here. But if you're using this fiberglass drywall tape, this stuff works really well, because all this does is glue the tape onto the foam. It doesn't act as the hinge. What you have to do though is, if you do use this, when like I did for this hinge, is let it sit for about a half an hour and then flex it a couple times to sort of break this seam that runs down the center there, and then let it set up. It sets up to basically almost like epoxy-like hardness after about 10 to 12 hours, which is what we're going to do on this nose before we start shaving it and sanding it. So anyway, well, like I say, it's a good product. It's only like $5 from Hobby King for a 4-ounce bottle, and I can build probably 3-4 planes with it, or 3 planes for sure, as long as I'm not too slap happy with it. Okay, so let's get on to the build here. So I'm just going to run a very thin bead down all the surfaces. And you don't have to worry, this stuff doesn't dry, you know, it's not like hot glue, it doesn't dry super fast, so you have some time to, you know, to get it spread and distributed the way that you want. More up on the top here. Okay, and then not forget these cross pieces. The nice thing about this, as you'll see as we progress into the next stage, is that when this does dry and gets completely hard, you can shave it and you can sand it, which makes you know, makes finishing a plane really, really nice. Oops. I also like to put just a tiny bit sort of on the inside of this slot here. Okay. Alright, so down we go. Okay. So now what I do is I just take, you know, this is just plain old masking tape, 1/2-inch masking tape or whatever, and just take several little pieces of it, just get everything lined up together, you know, and then every sort of couple inches or wherever I think I need to hold it together, I just put down some tape. Okay, so I'm not going to bore you with watching me tape this all down, but you can see, because I took the time to curve that. Now I'm going to be able to just take a piece of tape, really, and just actually I'll just show you what I do at the very tip here. Is I just take a piece of tape like that, and then just sort of pull it over the end, just to hold that piece down. And then, so I'll just continue on, and I'll finish taping the nose down. So that was pretty much how quick it was. You know, I didn't have to use any pins, didn't use a whole lot of hot glue, but I used the hot glue to my advantage. And you know, once I get this taped down, I'm just going to let it sit for a few hours, make sure the foam cure sets up good and hard, and then I'll show you the next step of how I like to build these noses now. But didn't use any pins. Again, quick and easy, and you know, just was not a whole lot of stress. So pretty good method for the way I like to build anyway. Okay, folks, so gonna get finished on with the tape, and on the next step I'll show you how I apply the foam cure into the grooves here. So we'll talk to you later. Hi everybody, back with you. So you can see I've got my my top piece glued and taped, so that's held into position. So what I'm going to show you right now is just kind of what I do now that I've got the nose basically shaped. Now what this foam cure does when I add it and then use the toothpick to drive it down inside is obviously right now on that, like from there to there on this seam, the only thing holding it is tape. So you can see it's you know, it's still pretty flexible. So I want to have that a little bit stiffer for handling and just for overall strength. So again, got my box of toothpicks handy. So all I do is one seam at a time. So I just like to start at the back, and again just lay very thin bead of foam cure down in that seam. Okay, again, you don't need to be in a big rush because it's not going to dry in you right away. And then just take a toothpick and then start to work it right down into the seam. Okay, so you're going to end up with a little bit of the excess foam cure on your toothpick, but that's good. The main thing you want to do is make sure you're getting it driven right down into that seam, because that's where you want the strength to be. Okay, and then just chuck that away. And then I even do these the other seam here, this side piece. Oop. There we go. And again, just working it down in there with my toothpick as much as I can, right down into the bottom of that seam. Okay, and then, you know, just using your finger or whatever, if some spills out onto the rest of your plane, it will sand off, but it's just easier to take off the excess. And then there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, you don't need to watch me do the rest of the seams, but I'm going to do the other seams as well. And then by the next time I come back, I will also have glued on my canopy, because the next stage I want to show you is how I actually shave the corners of these all of these seams, shave those down before I apply my spackle. And the reason that I shave those down before I apply the spackle is what I used to do back when I was building my planes way too heavy, is I just smear all that spackle right into these grooves, and then I ended up with a lot of spackle in there, and it just added a lot of weight to my plane. So by shaving it down first, it makes the groove much smaller, so the amount of spackle that I need to use is significantly less. So it saves me a little bit of weight, and it's a lot less messy, and it also saves me spackle in the long run. So, okay, so I'm going to finish this thing up, and like I say, by the next time I'll have the canopy on, because I also use my knife to shave the canopy and spackle that to make that nice and smooth. So we'll be back with you for the next step in a little while. Hi everyone, pardon me, so back again. Nose is all glued together, canopy's been glued on and shaped. So we just have, right now, we just have all these very rough edges here. And I'm just going to show you how I like to shave those down before I put the spackle on. Because I like to actually let the spackle set up overnight, because it's just makes it much easier to sand. So essentially, all I want to do is, you can see you've got all these grooves here with fairly rough or sharp edges. So this causes quite a bit of drag, and even just removing a little bit of weight helps make the plane lighter as well. So, and I really only do this on the fuselage. I do the about from here forward on the bottom, and then I do all the way back. Towards the latter stages of the build, when I have the electronics bay door on, which just fits in here, I'll also shave this part here and sort of sand that as well. Just mostly trying to take the rough edges off. It just makes makes the plane look a little bit better and makes it a little bit more slippery through the air. So, oh, pardon me, please. So I just wanted to demonstrate to you how I like to shave this off. And as I said to you earlier, the main reason I want to do this is I'm still going to have a bit of a groove here, but what I want to do is have as small a groove as possible, so that when I apply the spackle and then finish sanding the plane off, I have as little spackle down there as possible. If I was just to smear a bunch of spackle or filler in there now, it's just going to add a lot of weight to the plane, and I don't really want to do that. So I like to use this type of knife here. This is just a cheap one from Hobby King, and but you can get nice solid metal Olfa ones. The key here is to always use a brand new sharp blade. I buy these blades sometimes from Hobby King. They're also available at almost every dollar store where I live. I get like 10 blades for $1.25, $1.50, whatever. But it's well worth it, and you want a good sharp blade so that you don't tear. You don't want to be tearing the foam or bunching the foam. You want to be slicing the foam nice and smooth. So I'm just going to demonstrate to you here. Now, it's not always possible. You always, again, you want to try and use good, safe practices with your knife. Whenever possible, always shave away from yourself if you can. So what I like to do is I like to hold the knife at a bit of an angle. So if I hold it at 90 degrees, what happens lots of times is that the foam will start to bunch, and then you can end up tearing it. So by holding it at an angle, it makes a much cleaner cut. And then sometimes you'll also, if a little bit of glue or whatever gets on the blade, it'll bunch up, and then you can sort of move the blade back and forth, or even use a gentle sort of sawing motion, and it'll help get through. So essentially, I just sort of start off. Always take off less than what you think you can take off, and don't worry, it's going to be a little bit rough. Just keep on gently sliding through. If you start to feel too much resistance, don't force it through, because you can end up cutting more off than you want. So you might not be able to see this. It's not the smoothest sort of profile there, and I'll probably go over it one or two more times just to shave it down as much as possible. The thing is, with the knife, like I said, take off less. Always err on the side of taking off less than you think you need, because you can always fix it up later with sandpaper. If you take too much off, then you're going to end up with a big gouge in your plane, and then you either got to get creative and glue some foam back on, or put on more spackle. So always take off less than what you think you need. And then I also do these side pieces here. Again, just very gently sliding the knife along. Again, we're just trying to make the smallest possible groove for the least amount of spackle to make the nose nice and smooth. And then sometimes, just very carefully, I do have to pull towards myself, but just very light pressure on the knife. You don't want the knife slipping and and cutting you instead of the foam. Okay, so that's essentially what I do on all of these grooves. And also along this top here, I'll just show you. This is actually not really a groove, it's just sort of a corner. But you know, you can take a lot of foam off here and then finish off with your sandpaper. Again, nice and slow, nice smooth cuts with the knife. And there you go. And then I'll also do the same thing, you know, with the canopy, just on these real sharp grooves there. You can see on the canopy. So I sort of have to do the canopy sort of, you know, little sections at a time, and just keep going there. And then I also sort of just shave the back of the canopy, you know, down sort of about 45 degrees with my knife, so that when I start to sand I can smooth that in. So that's essentially the idea with the knife. Again, key things to remember: always use very gentle pressure on the knife. If you get in a situation where you do have to sort of pull it towards yourself, just be very gentle. Don't, you know, if you find your knife bogging down, back it off a little bit, move to a different section on the blade. That's why it's nice to have these long blades. Sometimes you know, the blade might be catching for a reason if there's glue or something else built up on it. And always, when in doubt, if you feel like you're starting to tear the foam, then maybe your blade is getting dull. One thing I've noticed about this, again, this is sort of MPF style foam, model plane foam type of foam. I find this foam dulls knives faster than Depron does. So if at any time you feel your knife is really starting to bog down or drag or tear the foam, just change the blade. If it's only 12 or 15 cents each, it's better to do that than to, you know, rip a great big gouge in your plane. So I'm just going to continue on, finish shaving this down, and then I'll come back and just give you a quick demonstration on how I like to apply the spackle, and then I'll be able to let that set up overnight and harden. So I'll be back with you shortly. Hi everyone. So I've got the plane shaved down, the nose and the canopy sort of shaved down to my liking. You know, it does, I know it's going to be hard to see maybe, it does look a little bit rough, but like I said before, always always take off a little less than what you think you need to take off, because the final real sort of art of shaping the nose the way that I like, and probably in the way that you like if you're going to use this method, comes when you use sandpaper. One thing I forgot to mention, I did pin my my canopy when I put that on, and if you're using foam cure or epoxy, probably most glues, I like to use these little pins with the little ball on the end of them. The reason being is that they're, you know, they're quite thin gauge, and they don't leave a great big gaping hole in the foam. What I've been finding sometimes is if you have to pin and it goes, the pin actually goes through the glue, obviously the glue is going to harden around it. So sometimes when you go to pull the pin out, it can be a bit tough. So what I've found is just give the pin like a little twist, you know, like you were just loosening a screw. Just give it a little twist, and that seems to break the bond of the glue on the shaft of the pin, and then you can pull it out nice and easy. You know, you don't want to start yarding on the thing and damage the foam or damage your foam. So okay, so this is the this is actually a brand new container. I just picked this up. So again, this is the Fast and Final lightweight spackling. But whatever the lightest weight spackling you can find in your part of the world, they sort of squirted into this thing in kind of a funny looking pattern. Must be the way the machine is. But what I do is I just, you know, like I said, I keep a box of these chunks of scrap foam, and I just like to use a piece of scrap foam. So I just take a little bit of it, you know, just like I was using a putty knife or something, and then just start, you know, sort of working it into the what's left of those grooves where I shaved. So it's not going to look, you know, real smooth. The main thing you want to focus on is you know, getting it down into the groove that you've made after shaving with the knife. So, you know, and then just use the use the foam to drag off any excess and then use it again. So, you know, if you've done any sort of filling, or, you know, I suppose even if you spread butter on your toast, you have a little bit of experience with this. So you just have to kind of, you know, take your time, work it down in, and I just keep doing that. And I even go so far as, you know, for example, right here you've got a tab that, you know, has gone into a slot, and there's a bit of a indentation there. So I'll even go as far as, you know, smoothing a little bit on there, and then so that when I sand that, that'll be nice and smooth. Because you're going to sand all this excess filler off after it's hardened. Okay, so that's about it for that step, folks. So I'm just going to go ahead now and finish doing this, and then like I say, I like to set this, although this dries, this particular spackle is actually very fast drying spackle. You know, you can sand it probably within a couple of hours. I always like to leave it overnight. What I found before is I've been impatient, and you know, the foam or the spackle hasn't quite hardened all the way down into the little groove, and you know, as I'm sanding, I end up pulling chunks out, and then I got to go back and fill it anyway. So, but if I leave it set up overnight, it's always nice and hard when I go to sand it the next day. So that'll be it. So next step, next time you see this, it'll you know, it'll have all the spackle on it. I'll just show you that real quick, and then be down to the sanding, and we'll be done with this video. So thanks for your patience thus far, and we'll see you again tomorrow morning. Hi everyone. So here we are at the pretty much the last stage of the nose construction, nose shaping, nose finishing on my NAMC Mig FA prototype build. So as you can see there, I didn't bother you with the pictures or shots of it with all the spackle all glopped all over it. So it's about 99% done. I'm going to mate it to the plane and then do a final sanding on the plane before I paint it. So what I like to use 2 grits of sandpaper. I start off with like about a 150 grit, and sand away about 90%, 95% of all the stuff, get it shaped the way that I want. The one thing I've noticed, especially with this fly value XPS or model plane foam, it's a bit softer than Depron, so I have to be very gentle when I sand it, otherwise I end up gouging the foam, which then makes it worse than when I started. So I always try and use as light a touch as I possibly can. And then once I'm done getting about 95% off, I like to finish up with like about a 220 grit and really give it a nice smooth finish. So like I say, once I get it mated to the plane, I'll probably do just a final little touch-up sanding because I need to sand the entire plane, like the KFs and all that sort of stuff, when I get it together. So anyway, I hope this has been helpful to you. Like I said, for the NAMC Mig-35 and the Mig FA, this is definitely a great technique to use. I had these 3 pieces of the nose on the bottom here shaped in probably about 5 minutes, and I didn't need to use any pins. So once it's all shaped together, and then like I showed you, I reinforced the score lines with foam cure, so it's really good and strong now. All these seams are really good and strong now that the foam cure is fully set up, and of course it has a little bit of spackle in there, but that foam cure works great. So it's made by Bob Smith Industries, which I think I already mentioned. You can get it from Hobby King, which is where I've been getting mine. Like I said, the nice thing about it compared to some other glues like hot glue, foam tack, that sort of stuff, is once it's dry and completely hard, it's very similar to epoxy. So it's you can shave it with your knife and you can sand it, and it doesn't pill up like some of the more flexible glues. If you try and shave them or sand them, they pill up and can actually pull right out of the seam, which is it's not that great. And it dries very light. I've done comparison builds. It dries essentially the same weight as foam tack does, as long as you don't get too heavy with it. So just a couple of quick tips before I close. If you're going to try this, the one thing that I've learned is, make sure first of all that your hot glue gun is good and hot, so that you're not going to have any problems with the glue not being quite hot enough. Like I say, I use the low temperature glue. You could use the high temperature glue. It's just going to take a little bit longer to set up probably. And you have to be more careful with the foam, that you don't melt the foam. The key thing is make sure you've got a couple pieces of scrap foam or whatever you want to scrape it out of there with handy, so that as soon as you lay your bead of glue down on the inside, you can start smearing it away. And always put less than what you think you might need. It's always easier to add a couple of drops more of the glue after the fact than it is to glob a bunch in there and then you're trying to scrape it off of there as it's setting up. And like I said, if hot glue, once it's down, it's really tough to get rid of unless you put isopropyl alcohol or something on it, take it all completely off, and then start over again. It's hard to really sand down if you put too much in there. So word to the wise there. Only reason I mentioned that, lesson learned. Ask me how I know. I did that one time, and but this technique has worked really well now for me on 2 planes, and not all park jets you're going to be able to do this. I think a couple of the version 4 planes from RC Powers, you can do it this way, because it's essentially sort of a 4-sided box, so to speak, and you put the top piece on last, so you can do that internal work before you put the top piece on. And it worked out really well, and no pins, no muss, no fuss, and reduced my stress, and it was pretty quick. Okay, so I'm just going to post this up on YouTube now. I'll have some links if you're interested. We're hoping to have this Mig FA, which is kind of a concept stealth plane. It looks really, really cool in the air. I've already been posting some testing information on it on our blog, so I'll have links to the the NAMC Mig-35.com website, as well as other information below on this video. So I appreciate you watching, appreciate your patience, and I hope maybe you might give this a try sometime, because I think it works really great to help build a park jet nose and takes a lot of stress away. So thanks for watching.